Hello, dear Bobby and my fellow baby boomers. And this is the third video that I've made in our awakening. As I mentioned before, there's two kinds of people out there. The people who take the red pill that want to be alert and wonder what's happening about them, and the people who take the blue pill, who are lost in the fog of the NFL, Kardashians, and American Idol, really not aware of what's happening. But those who are on the red pill, those that are interested in seeing the reality around us, questioning why do certain odd things happen? Like after 9/11, the only plane that left America, that was the only civilian aircraft allowed to fly, was flown from the United States to Saudi Arabia. And what a coincidence that the 19 hijackers who and all those aircraft were also from Saudi Arabia. Just makes one think a little bit. And so people that are starting to think and are inquisitive are what we call on the red pill. Now I'm taking my red pill. And with the red pill, or the awakening, we'll say, is a curiosity and finding the truth. And that's what the people on the red pill are about, is just open-minded, seeking the truth, no matter what party it is, no matter who it is. And then, as I mentioned in the previous video about President Trump's executive order dated December 21st, 1917, that allows the Secretary of State to seize the assets of those involved in human trafficking and government corruption. Another consideration is that under the people with the red pill, we have a lot of questions, and it's apparent that they can't run Trump off because of the Russians. So there's this talk about the 25th Amendment. Well, let's think about this 25th Amendment and where it came from. Did it just come from The 25th Amendment does not have a benign background. It was put in for a purpose. After the assassination of John Kennedy, there was a void. There was no Lyndon Johnson had no vice president. So, and also at that time, the wealthiest, most powerful man in America wanted to be president, but he could not get elected president. And a plan was hatched to make this man the president of the United States. Not through an election, not even getting the nomination of his party, but by being appointed the president of the United States. In fact, I've even written a book about it. And it's called The Watergate Amendment, and it's on Amazon. It's a fascinating story how one person by the name of David Young. Now, young David Young started out, I smiled as I mentioned, Milbank, Tweed, Hanley, and McCoy, one of the famous law firms in New York. As a young lawyer, he was assigned to help manage the personal estate of Nelson Rockefeller. He then worked for the Rockefeller for President campaign as a treasury. Then David took a job working with Henry Kissinger and moved to the White House with Henry Kissinger in '68 after Nixon got elected. Now, while at the White House working for Henry Kissinger, this was the time of and under the time of the great Pentagon Papers of the Nixon fame. according to public, Richard Nixon was so furious, so upset about the Pentagon Papers. Well, they even made a recent movie about it. But in real life, Richard Nixon didn't care about the Pentagon Papers. He shrugged his shoulders. It had nothing to do with Nixon. The Pentagon Papers that were written by Dr. Ellsberg, who was a college bro of Henry Kissinger's, and Kissinger helped to direct the writing of the papers. But the Ellsberg Pentagon Papers were about started after the Second World War and included Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy and Johnson. Nothing to do with Nixon. But it was Kissinger who insisted that the papers not be allowed to be viewed by the public. And it was Kissinger who was on a rampage, and his assistant, David Young, commissioned a gang of burglars called the Plumbers. And guess who gave him the name the Plumbers? Yes, it was David Young. And the reason for the Pentagon Papers, the break-in and the like, was a part of an organized plan to get Nelson Rockefeller appointed President of the United States through the 25th Amendment. And that was authored by Birchby of Indiana. And in the book, Birchby indicated how impressed he was with the input given to him by Governor Nelson Rockefeller. And he acknowledges even in the book that the governor and his staff had given long and deep study to the problems of disability and secession. So Senator Birchby, who authored it, the 25th Amendment, acknowledged that it was Governor Rockefeller who helped him do the amendment. All kind of interesting, and David Young played his little part, working for Kissinger at the time. After the Watergate, David Young was granted immunity, the only one that was granted immunity. He got out of any of the problems with the Watergate break-in and everybody else went to jail and the like. The Senate Watergate Committee gave him a clean bill of health and approved, and Judge Sirica gave him a pass. So David Young, with all this White House experience and connections, decided he was going off to England. And he went off to England, to London, and got a doctorate degree at Oxford University. And his doctorate degree, and you could look it up on the internet, is to this day blocked from public view for security reasons. Now, what security reasons there could be with a doctorate thesis that was written over 50 years ago, who knows? But it is still a secret. Now, David Young went on, after he received his doctorate degree, to start a company called Oxford Alakinda. That's ANALYCTICA. He was the founder and president of Oxford Alakinda. But young David, with his doctorate degree, his secret doctorate degree, started a little consulting firm. Now he only had 2 customers when he started out. He started with Standard Oil and the Chase Manhattan Bank. Both of these companies are Rockefeller Holdings, and allowed David to grow his company to one of the most influential business organizations in the world. They have over 50 governments that they consult with on a daily basis. All of the G7 countries, including or plus China and Brazil, the World Bank, the UN, and hundreds of other private and public sector companies. Now, the question I throw out about David Young and his international connections and influence, and it harkens me back to the 25th Amendment, when at the White House and with Birch Bayh and the Rockefellers hatched the 25th Amendment, and if Squeaky Fromm and Sarah Moore and perhaps the third assassination attempt against Gerald Ford would have been lethal, then Nelson Rockefeller would have been appointed President of the United States, because he had been appointed Vice President of the United States through the 25th Amendment. And he was one heartbeat away from his lifelong ambition to be the President. And the players that put in and ousted Nixon and Agnew, are they the same cabal that is in operation today? We don't know. But there's a string of information of David Young, Oxford Anaconda. And just something to think about. And as they say, put that in your pipe and smoke it, because there's a lot more tobacco that we can be putting in the pipes. But as the world keeps turning, and it seems to be getting brighter just as the seasons are, the sun is receding a little bit, and the days are getting a little longer. We will shine more and more light on what's happening in the world, especially in the world of the government around us. And I haven't seen much activity of Hillary. I don't know if it's because of that ankle bracelet or shoe that she's wearing. We don't see too many protesters that aren't being paid, because President Trump has seized the assets of a lot of wealthy people that are charged with corruption and human trafficking. Let's keep up the good work and keep taking that red pill. Helps that inquisitive mind. Thank you.